You say Schlemiel, and I say Schlamatzel. You say Maisel, but I keep saying Maisel. Schlemiel, Schlamatzel. Let's not get hostile, or I'll call this podcast off. Hey, welcome to the Serious TV Drama Podcast. I'm Scott, and joining me tonight, the Gentile to my Jew, and the hey lady to my dude, it's Jamie. Hey, Jamie.
Hi. Hi there.
I didn't warn you about any of that.
No, I didn't see it coming.
That's what she said. So, Jamie, I'm excited that you are here to join us tonight. We are going to be having a conversation about the Amazon series, The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. By the way, I'm going to probably, whenever I mention the name of the series, I'm probably going to pause for a moment because I apparently constantly mispronounce her name. I constantly am calling her Maisel instead of Maisel. And considering I'm also one of the quote-unquote chosen people, it's really bad that I keep doing that.
You fail.
Next thing you know, I'm going to be calling Joel's dad, Moshe instead of Moishe or something like that. So our plan here, our loosey-goosey kind of plan here, is that we're going to chat about the past two seasons and also what we might foresee for the third season, which, as I gather, is due sometime later this year. The best guess is probably sometime in the late fall, early winter. The show always seems to come back, sometime in November or December. So it's a good guess. That'll be the case this year as well.
Yes. Post Halloween.
Yes.
And pre Christmas or Hanukkah.
Yeah. Well, I would have said post high holidays.
Oh wait.
But perhaps pre-Hanukkah.
Pre-happy holidays, all of you. Pre-happy holidays.
Well, that's it's what we call all the stuff we're doing in September and October. Generally, we call them the high holidays. So, and actually one of those high holidays figures into a little bit of a conversation I'm going to be having about something in season 2, but we're a ways away from it because we haven't even bounced into season 1 yet. So. I guess we're going to do that shortly. Don't need some grand introduction to season 1. One of the things one should also note about this show is that the writer and creator is Amy Sherman Palladino. You've probably seen her when she's won. I guess was it the Emmy? She won a couple Emmys or the Golden Globe. No, it had to be Emmys because they don't show writing awards in the Golden Globes.
Yes.
She's quite the character herself. She's great. I mean, she's very funny, but just from the way she dresses and everything, it's one of those people. Oh, I've seen her before, and I know she actually has an impressive body of work. But I'm just going to focus on what she's doing here, and it's also kind of cool that her husband also happens to be one of the writers, and she's directed a ton of the episodes. He's directed a few himself, but she's really the person guiding the ship. But it is kind of interesting that there is still a husband and wife team to a certain extent behind the show, which kind of reminds me a little bit of what's going on screen. So I thought that's kind of neat.
Yes, and then her husband's with Family Guy, correct?
I think so. I'll confess I didn't look him up because I wasn't focusing on him.
I recognize I'm pretty sure he's with Family Guy, which helps bring in the whole Alex Bornstein connection.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that. Wasn't she on the Mad TV show way back when or something? I feel like she.
Yeah, and she was in that, and she's done a ton of voiceover work.
Yeah, well, clearly. I mean, she has that kind of voice where you can easily picture it. Quite the different resume than, say, what's her name? Rachel Brosnahan? Yeah, Brosnahan. Who, before this, I knew her primarily as the chicken hiding on House of Cards. That was like the main thing I knew her from. And finally getting to see her on this, it's like, oh, what? Not that she was never bad on House of Cards. She was fine.
But this is, you polar opposite.
Oh, and when you realize the reservoir of talent that this actress has, I mean, I'm stunned by it, simply because I only knew her from that. Again, not that what she did on that was bad, right? It's kind of like to a lesser degree, how I now feel about Aubrey Plaza, who I always liked from Parks and Recreation. Thought she did a marvelous job on it, and I know she's done some other things, indie stuff, whatever. But it wasn't until Legion I went, whoa, I don't think there's anything she can't do. And
she's pretty fantastic.
Yeah. And it's funny because then when you see her like on an interview, like on, say, I know she was on Colbert recently and so on and so forth, she's kind of like a maybe less, well, I wouldn't say less sardonic because that probably wouldn't be true. Maybe a lighter form of her character on Parks and Rec to a certain extent. I still think of her from the interviews. I'm like, oh, I don't see that dynamo that she was on Legion here. So she keeps it under wraps. She's amazing. Anyway, that's for a future podcast that we'll be doing probably in about a week or so. But we are here again talking about the marvelous Mrs. Maisel.
You did it. Good job.
Yeah, I told you, but I'm going to be pausing like an ass every time. If I had if Dan was working on this podcast, or if I had his post-production capabilities, I would just be just dropping in like a little clip of
Maisel.
And for like really, if I have any like really old school TV fans, it would definitely be in like Paul Schaefer's monotone voice, like they did on the old Letterman show back in the 80s. Billy Joel, I think. Anyway.
I'm actually really disappointed that that's not going to happen.
I'm sorry. I didn't think I needed to learn stuff. And, if he can do it... No, that's not true. He's a very talented guy. And he'll return to the podcast eventually. He'll never listen to this one, so I can say whatever I want. Okay, so, season 1. I don't really have a specific starting point here. Obviously, season 1 is the genesis of the series and how it starts out, whatever. So when you watch, let's just go. Let's go right to like the pilot.
Okay.
Just so we know, just our feelings when we were first introduced to the show and how it starts to unfold and how we set up the premise of the series as a whole, which is why the pilot's always, quite frankly, the most important episode of any TV show. What were your feelings on it, and just when you watched it way back when, and did you watch it when it first came on, so on and so forth?
I did not watch it until this last year. I think I picked it up over the winter because I didn't have Amazon Prime when it first aired. So I picked it up, I don't know, probably like eight or 9 months ago, actually. So I really, really love the pilot. There are a few episodes in the first 2 seasons thus far. I mean, I liked all of them. There's none I have any complaints about. But there are 2 or 3 episodes that are just solid gold. And the pilot is one of them for me. Just to get the nostalgia of the 1950s wedding, the fun that's poked at the tradition of the Jewish bride's parents. And when we see her stand up, I mean, we're immediately introduced to who we're going to see dominate that microphone, at her wedding. But with her standing at the microphone then, it's in very much the fashion of a 1950s, because it starts in 1958, 1950s traditional bride, thanking everybody for coming, and then all of a sudden the wisecrack about the shrimp.
Yes. The infamous shrimp comment.
and the chaos that ensues, and when she looks over at Joel and just his face of adoration. Like, you immediately like him because you're like, oh, this dude gets her. And you don't get that in a lot of these, like, 1950s, 1940s stories. You don't see the guy admiring that weird quirkiness, in a woman. So, right, I mean, within the first 15 minutes, I knew I was going to like this show.
Right. Yeah, I would subscribe to everything you just said, just about. I mean, other than maybe I could probably think of some examples of the guy being into it, but I think more from movies rather than TV series.
Yes,
because I think that's the genesis of a lot of like classic 40s, 50s comedies. Like if you go back to Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn, and that era kind of thing is kind of vaguely reminiscent of.
Yeah, and there's definitely, you get those characters that are mused by a female's quirkiness, but that same character is going to, I don't want to say belittle. I mean, because by our standards, nowadays it's definitely belittling if someone were to do that. But then it wasn't really belittling to them then, as far as the male perspective goes.
Right.
But with Joel, I mean, outside of the fact that he, ends up betraying her in the marriage, he gets her. And you figure that out quite quickly because even, with the little bit of problems that come in, towards the end of the episode and into the second episode, you can still see that he's just a kid who's being a dipshit, but ultimately he still gets her.
Right. And also because it's based on the time, like if this same relationship was taking place 20, 30, 40, whatever number of years later, then you'd have a somewhat different story where it wouldn't just be that he gets her, but he may realize what ability or talent she has and being trying to direct her that way. 1958, and
Right.
especially in his thought pattern, that's not the way he's going to be thinking. It's just
Right, and I'm kind of amazed by the writing of the show that it hits that immediately. There's not some like drawn out process for us to figure this out, and you'll notice part of the episodes that I really love the most, and I think part of the reason why I love these episodes is because there are these episodes that they have a heartbeat, and every bit of dialogue, every bit of conversation, it hits in these beats that you could strip away the entire set and put them on a stage, and you have a stage play. And it happens within the first 15 minutes, and then you'll get 2 or 3 episodes throughout the 2 seasons that it does that, and it just like, I don't know, I can only speak for myself, but it really pulls me into something new and interesting in the way that they're telling this story. And it's obvious, but it's not so obvious. I don't know. It is very intriguing to me because we don't see shows done like this anymore.
Right. What's interesting for me about the series and watching that, both that first episode and the first season as a whole, and I would also mention that I also came to the series late. In fact, I think I watched the first, I want to say 3 or 4 episodes earlier this year, and I watched them sporadically. I liked it, but I just had a lot of stuff going on. Let's be honest. And then I made a point to myself to go back and really give it another shot. And then next thing you know, I reeled off about 12 episodes in a row. I think it was like the final 6 of season 1, and then the first 6 of season 2. I was up like all the way up to like 5:30 in the morning or something because I couldn't stop watching it. And when a show can do that to me, that's saying something.
And what's interesting is that it isn't done in the typical manner where the end of an episode leaves you with a cliffhanger. So you're like, oh,
right.
I step into the next episode and see what happens. They literally just pause the story and wait for you to come back.
Yeah,
and it's just, like I said, it's like watching a play, like, oh, it's intermission.
Yeah, you're right.
You want to come back, but you're not panicked that you have to watch it right now. And it's like you walk back into your friend's house and hang out with them for a little while.
Right. It's interesting because it's become another one of these shows that I tend to link certain shows together. And sometimes it's obvious why I think they're similar, and sometimes not so much. And the really good shows are the ones that can hold up the comparisons together, and some shows don't. Like a show that I often use, especially when you're dealing with a period show. And it doesn't matter what the period is, but if it turns out to be like late 50s or into the 60s, yeah, the first show I'm pulling out of my head is going to be Mad Men, because that's a show that a lot of people watched and was very well done, that pretty much documents like from literally 1960 through like 1970, pretty much. And even though this takes place, probably just a little bit before Mad Men begins, Mad Men did have a lot of scenes that took place in the 50s as well. And you can kind of and plus it also takes place in New York, so you have that kind of lineage that kind of reminds me of it. But it also kind of, a show that's not funny at all, really, or rarely funny, it kind of reminds me of The Crown in a lot of ways. I feel there's a lot of odd parallels I can make between The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel and The Crown. I'm totally riffing here. There are notes on this one. They both have a woman at the center who is trying to do her own thing, but she's constantly beset by the rules of society and issues with her own family and the demands and rather strict nature of her family. She is also has a relationship where she's married, and obviously in Maisel's case, their marriage is on the rocks. But 2 seasons in, they still haven't officially divorced, as far as I know. Right? They haven't officially divorced on the show. Right? No, papers have not been signed or put through. And quite frankly, and maybe it's somewhat less so on Maisel, but my feeling is with The Crown, I'm always less interested in stuff dealing with Philip than I am with the Queen herself. And scenes that are just with Philip, I'm always kind of like, they're occasionally good, but a lot of times I'm like, oh, can we get to the other stuff?
Right. It's a setup. It's a setup for Elizabeth.
And I'm not going to say I don't feel that way to a certain extent with Joel as well on this show. Not as much.
No, I have to agree with you. Also, there's a baby that apparently is starting to look like Churchill, so there's another connection.
Yeah, nice. I didn't even think of that one. And the only and honestly, maybe the reason why it's not as much is because at least Joel and the actor Michael Zegan will have the occasional scene with Christ, Kevin Pollak. Love Kevin Pollak. I wish they would give him an opportunity to do some impressions on the show, which would be weird, but it's still kind of funny. But those of us who've known him for years, he's one of the great comic impressionists of all time. He does a killer Walken and Shatner and so on and so forth.
Right.
And again, his storyline still does tend to tie more closely to her. So again, he doesn't bother me quite as much as Philip. But the weird thing about the character, and it's the actor, and I don't blame him, but I know him mainly from his role that he had on the show Rescue Me, and I'm sure he's done dozens of other things. And I did not IMDb him. I'm not about to. But to me, he was like the young kid who ends up becoming a probie, which was like what they call a rookie in the firehouse in the later seasons of Rescue Me, even though he always seemed like he was still basically barely more than a teenager, maybe his early 20s. He doesn't look any different to me. Well,
he almost feels as if he's a bit of a typecast in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm. Right. And maybe this is something about him. There's certain things I don't quite. I have to force myself to buy about the beginning of the show. Because she's such a great character, and she's clearly very, smart beyond her years, and as clever and as witty as anyone I've seen on a show in some time. But in the confines of the show, I feel like she would know or would realize what she's dealing with as far as her husband's comic abilities or lack thereof.
But I think if that story took place today, yes, absolutely 100%. But I think with the story taking place back then, you've got to remember she's measuring her thighs and ankles every single day.
Right.
She's going to do her exercises every single day to make sure her thighs and her ankles and her hips and her breasts are all absolutely proportionate. If you watch her mom, that's a really good indication of why she wouldn't catch on that Joel's not quite what he wants to be or what he's trying to be. She had no understanding of the world outside of her and her girlfriends in college and her and her girlfriends and their mothers.
Right.
And at that point in time, that's so very normal, especially when you talk about a family that has a substantial amount of money. I mean, you live in that area. How much would an apartment like that run compared to one that Susie lived in?
Oh, it's insane.
You know? Right.
Although nowadays where Susie lives would also be insane.
Right, exactly. Like, I don't know people in the Midwest who have houses as big as their apartment that's in the middle of New York. So she has lived an incredibly sheltered life, and even though she's a bit foul-mouthed and crazy, she's sort of a diamond in the rough in the fact that she's not like... She didn't get her quirky sense of humor and personality from the people that she was around necessarily. Like, she just kind of tripped upon it herself because she was a socialite. When you see in season 2 and they go to the Catskills, that's a really another great example to go, you can see like why these situations are funny and they're comedy gold, but you go, how did she become this other person? Someone like Susie, that's a rough and tumbled sense of humor. Sarcasm is going to run really easily. When you have a hard life, sarcasm comes really naturally.
Oh, yeah.
So it's not a shock to me that she doesn't, given the time period, given how she was raised, who she was raised by. And by the way, I have to say that Maren Hinkle and Tony Shalhoub are just absolutely amazing in this show, and probably some of my very favorite characters. I love Maisel, or Midge, but truthfully, for me, the heart of the show is in all of the supporting actors and actresses.
Interesting. I think the reason I even wanted to give the show a shot to begin with was because of Tony Shalhoub's involvement. Because I love Monk. Let's just leave it at that.
Yes, and he's gold in this. Like every single one of my favorite scenes. Well, okay, every single one of my favorite scenes is either of him and somebody else, or himself, or Susie. Like Abe and Susie. Like, to me, I could watch 2 seasons of just the two of them living their lives, and I'd probably really love it.
That would be something. I think what you said is pretty much spot on as far as why she would not have caught on. I'm kind of throwing it out there as something, as I'm watching it occurred to me, and then in retrospect, maybe I could buy it. And I think a lot of it is from her shelter life. So she wouldn't, and plus it's the era, so she might not have necessarily been exposed to all these other things where Joel was lifting his material from, for example. The devil, but to play devil's advocate to what I just said, on the other hand, someone who clearly, putting aside how much time she has to spend to put herself together and blah, 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 and all the rituals and everything, I understand that, but she is devoting still a healthy amount, or unhealthy maybe, amount of time to try to help him, and doing all this stuff and going to his shows and cooking the meals to get him his slot and whatever. I'm kind of surprised that she wouldn't have, like, just to check out comedy stuff, that she would never have bought a comedy album herself, especially at that time. But
well, again, to get a comedy album, she would have had to slum it on her own. Now, she had fun going out with him, on the deeper, rooted side of town, going to these clubs with him. But she never thought that world belonged to her. There's a scene where she goes to that diner. What is it called? Like the City Spoon or something like that. But she's kind of having a memory of their wedding night, and they're sitting at the table at that diner, and he's like, hey, we could get an apartment here, and, we could live this life forever. And she's like, no, I need nice things. And we can bring our kids up to mom and dad, and then we can go out, and then we can hit the town. But she still needs nice things. She needs to be protected. And to show that she didn't know really what funny was. Her own self. She didn't even know she was funny because she was always treated like she wasn't funny. She was a little bit off.
Right.
You know, well, you know Miriam. It's always Miriam. She's got her ways.
Right.
But she was never like, no one in her family laughed and was like, you are hilarious. It wasn't until Susie told her what funny was that she knew what funny was.
Right. It was more like she was tolerated. It was like kind of a thing. Yeah.
Right. So it's easy to see in the sense that Joel got her. He was amused by her. But she was doing all those things that, I mean, she wasn't working. She was doing all the things that a young married woman was supposed to do. You take care of the kids, you set up the appointments, you get his shirts to the dry cleaners, you make dinner, you have all of the colleagues come over for dinner. You know, you have to wine and dine them so that your husband can get the promotion. She was 100% typical as a wife and 100% atypical as a woman.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Oh, totally makes sense. So the other thing when I was watching, I guess within the first episode or two, I'm actually a Bob Newhart fan, and I'm familiar with what he did, pre his TV shows like back in the '60s. So I got right off the bat. I was like, he's doing Bob Newhart's bit.
Right.
So I was just so that once I realized what was going on, I was like, oh, I'm waiting for that's got to be what's going to blow this up. And I love that idea because that's it's so taboo in comedies.
I love how she comes running to him too, and she's like, "He stole your bit. Aren't you mad?"
Brilliant. And I would say, as far as the Joel character, especially as far as season 1 is concerned, probably the strongest stuff with him tends to be at the very beginning and at the very end of the season for me.
Yes, absolutely.
When we realize that he's a fraud, and when he tries on his own, tries to do like with her own advice, and he fails miserably, then you fast forward to him seeing her perform for the first time. At the end, which is a great scene.
Like, it was a great scene, right? It was awesome for her in a way to finally for him to recognize that, but it also was kind of painful because it's like, that would be really hard for something to be your dream, and then you feel like you're not being supported in that dream or whatever the hell he was going through, and then you leave this person who supported you only to see them be 10 times more successful in said dream. Like that'd be so heartbreaking in a lot of ways.
There's a number of levels to that heartbreak, and you just described most of them right there. And considering who she is and what she did, it's the only time I feel any sympathy for his character. Quite honestly, because everything else is his own fault. But that
and when he's I have a little bit of sympathy for him when he's at home. When he's moved in with his parents because they didn't work out with his secretary.
Penny Pan.
Penny Pan.
Great name.
And when he's in bed, in his old room.
Oh, yeah.
And though he did it to himself, I mean, like, come on, we've all screwed up at some point in our life, and then we have to come to terms with going, oh, I just totally screwed myself. But looking at all of his toys, and there's this feeling of, like when he was a kid, and it showed, the flashback of him and his dad, and, all the dreams and the hopes and the thoughts that you have when you're sitting in your bedroom as a kid, what your life's going to be when you get out of that room. And as an adult, you come back and you see all that, and that the days of dreaming of what your life's going to be are kind of coming to an end because you just fucked it up.
Yeah.
And so he's just sitting there looking at his toys, and it's not, it's not what he's saying. It's just, it's more of the storytelling itself than it is. It's just a moment that I really feel for his character.
Yeah. I mean, I got that it was a moment where I was probably supposed to feel that way, but maybe I was just like, nah, I was more like screw you kind of sentiment towards the character still, so I didn't feel quite as bad. I felt more bad from having to deal with his mom all the time.
I'll be honest, I have a soft spot for fuck up, so.
Okay. Well, I am one, so I can't really feel bad for another one. It doesn't work that way. You kind of you touched on Susie a bit there. I really like although it's a little limited compared to, because she's a supporting part, not the main character. But watching her character arc through season 1 and going into season 2 also, but we're in season 1 right now. But how it's interesting, because whereas Midge is, the whole thing is about her becoming, not just a comedian, but also kind of like an independent person.
Yes.
kind of breaking the usual norms, not just for women, but also somewhat, being Jewish is kind of a thing too.
And in a lot of ways, I know we'll touch on this in a minute. We'll probably touch on it more, but for being a woman,
mm-hmm.
For the Jewish community, and also breaking down the barriers on censorship, which is where the partnership with Lenny Bruce sets in.
Right.
And it's a woman doing it. So it's even like more off the wall. And I feel like if she was a real person, if you were to go back and look at like Joan Rivers or Phyllis Diller or something, and you would go back to those times and be like, it had to have been mind blowing to see a woman not just telling a joke and getting laughs, like not that, but telling a dirty joke and getting laughs. We take it for granted. I mean, we live in an age of like Sarah Silverman. We like in the 1950s, a woman on stage telling a dirty joke and getting laughs was, I mean, nearly an impossible feat to earn respect that way.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you're going all the way back to the late 50s, at least by the early 60s, you had, and I'm sure you've looked into this yourself, you had women starting to test the waters, like Joan Rivers, for example. Well, I think she'd done stage work in the 50s, but I think it was in the 60s she actually started performing in clubs and stuff.
Right, and the waters were definitely being tested. But like I said, I mean, they do of it a lot of it just to tell a story and for the sake of the show, kind of give a lot of, we get to see Lenny Bruce and stuff, but they give a lot of what he's responsible for kind of over to her because it means a little bit more in this story.
Yeah, no, I know what you're saying. I don't think they necessarily take away from anything that because they make references to it, but we're focusing on her.
Maybe I described it wrong. I don't feel like they're taking anything away from him, and not giving him credit where credit's due. I don't feel like it's that. It's just that they mirror that.
No, that's correct. Yeah. Oh, and yeah. So, well, yeah. We're talking about Lenny Bruce. I'll concentrate on Lenny Bruce now. Then I'll flip back to Susie in a minute. Because the point I was going to make about Susie was just interesting, is because it's also, she's got this journey as well, and it's also her.
She is awesome, and I want her to be my BFF.
I mean, just the running gag throughout. I guess it's throughout season 1 with the business cards.
Yeah, with the phone number.
Is fantastic. That they're homemade business cards.
And that, like, every time that she actually means to say, I understand you, we're compatible, or like, I love you, or I care about you, the words that she uses are, fuck you.
Yeah, it's interesting because she's great because she's a character that, from on the face of it, is not one who's inclined to show empathy towards others, but you see her kind of being more humanized as the show goes on, as opposed to just being a typical hard-edged, sarcastic, When
they're sitting in the diner and she's telling Miriam, like, you're really good. And she goes, no, you're really good. And Miriam's like, don't start crying or I'm going to start crying. And then she starts to tear up and she's like, what is this wet stuff on my face? And she's like, you're crying. And she's like, give me a mirror. I need to see what this looks like.
Oh, that was a laugh out loud funny scene. I love that scene. That's one of my favorites in the actual whole series, just about.
Yes.
So flipping back to Lenny Bruce, it's fascinating because Lenny Bruce being one of the only characters in this series who is an actual historic figure, and it, obviously it makes one want to do a little research on Lenny Bruce, beyond what one might have already known. I mean, I knew a little bit about Lenny Bruce. I'd watched some videos of his, clips of him, years ago, because I knew what a major figure he was in the world of comedy, and I know a lot of it had.
And you can't be a fan of well, geez, I mean,
Everybody.
So many comedians now. I guess the list would be so long because, again, breaking boundaries constantly.
But if you're going back to Lenny Bruce, and if we're talking about the people he immediately more directly influenced, then you're into people like your George Carlins or Richard Pryor is also would be in there, because those people then influenced the next generation and so on and so forth. But it all can all flip it back to Lenny Bruce. Well, it's funny because the actor who's playing him, I think it's Luke Kirby. I knew him from. He's on The Deuce, actually, and there's nothing that very interesting about his character on The Deuce, other than there's this little. We find out that briefly that the character is gay, which really doesn't matter. I'm not even sure why they told us that on The Deuce, but he's kind of just a straight arrow. And
I've never seen him in anything where he was, to be perfectly honest, he was never really notable. I don't know, I never really carried his name with me anywhere. And while I was watching the first season, about halfway into the second season, I was like, I know I recognize him, but I didn't pay much attention. And so finally I went and I looked it up, and I was like, oh yeah, okay, I've seen that, and I've seen that. And the fact that he's been in all these other things, and I just, it was nothing. And then all of a sudden he's really stepped out, and
oh yeah,
it's pretty impressive.
And what I adore is because even though they're playing around with his character, because obviously there was no Midge Maisel or anything like that way back when, so they're going to take some liberties. And again, I'm going to get into those more when we talk about season 2. But I love the relationship between Midge and Lenny. And one of the things I love about it is that at no point in time is it ever something even remotely going to be romantic.
Yes.
But it's a mutual admiration. And it's really... And there is even a genuine nice little chemistry between the actors. So it really makes their scenes together really work beautifully well.
Yeah.
It's. I mean, I don't know how long this show will go on for. I don't know how many seasons they project Maisel to go on for. I don't know. It could end up being just 3 or 4. They could get 5. Who knows?
It depends on how many awards they win every year.
Yeah, and whether Amazon believes it's a cash cow or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't know what kind of time jump they're going to do between seasons either. Although I can kind of guess. It's a fun show about these period shows, is trying to figure out the time jumps. Did it with Mad Men, did it with The Americans, did it with probably going to do it with The Crown, and definitely going to do it with this show as well. But I also know I know when Lenny Bruce dies, so there is that thought in the back of my head. It's like, I wonder how far they'll take that.
I mean, do you think that they'll include that in their story?
Honestly, I don't know if I was thinking about this. Maybe at a certain point, his involvement, Lenny Bruce's involvement on the show, lessens, and we don't see him as much. I mean, it's not like he's on every episode anyway. He's just a recurring character.
That's true. So, if anything, maybe it'll be like a notable mention, but
I don't know. Again, I'll there's no spoiler saying when he dies in 1966.
Right.
And my determination, which I'm going to talk about more when we talk about season 2, is right now the show leaves off in very early 1960.
Yes. And rumors have it that they are going to be in Miami
Yes.
for a large portion of
Right.
season 3.
Right. Yes, you're ruining my last segment, damn you. Anyway,
I got you.
it's fine. So we'll see. I mean, there is a major thing that's going to happen at Lenny Bruce in 1961, so we'll see. Because he has this huge performance at Carnegie Hall, which is like one of his big historic performances. And the fact that she'd be associated with someone who basically does stand up at Carnegie Hall is kind of a big deal, you know?
Right.
So, what was I going to say? Oh, yeah. So, one of the things I loved about season 1, episodes, whatever you want to call it, and I didn't know this actor was going to be on the series, even though it's only one episode. But once I saw him, I was like, oh, of course he has to be on the series. Wallace Shawn appears in the series. I love Wallace Shawn.
Yes.
Anyone who knows who Wallace Shawn is loves Wallace Shawn. So the whole episode with him, her trying to hire this guy to write jokes for her, and the way that all plays out, it's so great. That's one of my favorite episodes of the season, easily, if not the show overall, just because it's just perfect.
That's a great episode, and it's fantastic too, because it's like one of those really important life lesson episodes.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it's hilarious, it's like, no, like, you have the goods, you got to do this shit yourself. There's no cheating. There's no easy way out.
It's definitely one of my favorite things about the show. They actually do get a lot of nice, interesting guest stars who appear in that first season. I was very happy that I wasn't spoiled on any of it. So I didn't know Jane Lynch was going to be on the show.
Yeah, and can we talk about that for a minute? Let's talk about her.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about Sophie. Let's talk about Sophie Lennon.
Yeah.
So how did, I'm sure everybody had a similar, take on her stage character. But how did you like the scene, like, the first time that Miriam goes to Sophie's house and we see Jane Lynch, like, really be Jane Lynch, I guess, for a lack of better. I don't know. It was one of my absolute favorite scenes, is when she's sitting there with the tea and the macaroon, and she's like, "Wow, you're really something," because she ate it.
Well, I love the fact that both seasons have a scene like that with one of the two characters, where we experience Midge going to Sophie Lennon's house, and then at end of season 2 we get Susie going to Sophie Lennon's house, and how they both experience things there.
Miss Lennon's worn it twice. It's yours now.
Yeah. I wouldn't say Jane Lynch was being Jane Lynch so much.
The very low tone sarcasm that's just right behind every line she delivers. That's like classic Jane Lynch. Like, that's her. God, she delivers that sarcastic kindness better than about anybody.
It was making me think kind of. It was almost like Maggie Smith from Downton Abbey, but a younger version, kind of thing.
Yes.
A certain regal manner and the way she was, just and comparing him to Maggie Smith is a huge compliment, by the way.
And, truthfully, on one hand, she comes across as sort of, a little bit of a villain. Not really a villain, a comedy villain. But if you were to really think about how hard won her success was before, somebody like Miriam comes along, what she had to do to be successful, and then here comes this bubbly, funny, sarcastic competition that's a knockout, and how difficult would it be to be supportive of that, to feel like you might get pushed aside? Because part of the thing that makes her special is that she's one of the only women doing it.
Mm-hmm. There is that. What makes it really interesting with the Sophie Lennon character, when we have that whole thing happen in season 1, and then when they bring it back to in parts of season 2 as well, is I'm cautious about referring to her as a villain as well.
Yeah, because she's not quite there. I mean, she did give her a heads up, like you know, when she said you don't have a dick. She wasn't trying to be a jerk. She wasn't trying to squash her dreams. She was being realistic. She was telling her the truth. Something maybe she didn't have to agree with, but she did need to recognize.
And what Midge does sets that whole ball rolling.
Exactly.
And quite frankly, you know, and it's almost like she had Tourette's and couldn't control, you know, her mind or something.
Right.
I mean, because you're watching it, like you're sabotaging yourself. I mean, she totally committed an act of self-sabotage, because how else did you think that was going to go? How else you just blew up this woman, made an attempt to blow up this woman's career for the sake of some jokes in a club, you know, in front of her manager.
Right.
Right. That's insanity. You know, and it was one of those kind of like jaw-dropping moments, like. I was watching, like, I'm not sure why she's doing that, beyond the fact that it's such great fodder for comedy, what she saw and experienced, and her love of poking, you know, not just poking fun at, but also, you know, she's all about the truth. That's what she's talking about in her act, about her own life and about women in general and about being everything. And of course, she's going to treat this the same way, without realizing. What are you doing?
And it's odd because on one half it's like, well, that's really commendable because you're not afraid to speak the truth. But then the other half is like, oh, there's the immature young woman that's married to Joel.
Right. She hasn't reached a stage in her life where she should be doing something like that. And it ends up, at least in this field, the comedy field, whatever, it comes off less courageous and more just dundering to me. Yeah. Foolhardy. Yeah. There are other, you know, if she was like just a pure, like, say, a writer or something like that, and you had this experience or whatever, that might come off differently. Might still not be great, but comedy, oof, that's...
Right.
That's a rough and tumble world now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's well, you know, the whole conversation she has outside of the courthouse or whatever with Lenny, you know, and she's like, "Do you love it?" And he's like, he goes through the list of things he'd rather be doing, you know, because it's so difficult. And man, you better take people hating you, because if you can't find that funny, then you have no business in the business. But in a lot of ways, it was really necessary for her to kind of have that foolhardiness, because that's really what pushed her into becoming closer to being a professional, because she had to take the hits. Right.
Oh, and then hooking back to Lenny again, I loved him kind of. I don't want to say he comes to the rescue exactly, because that comes off a way I don't mean it to, but the fact that he gets to play a certain part in being able to get her on stage again, and then which is just great. I really love the way they use that character. And if someone had told me X number of years ago, oh, there's going to be a show about, you know, this, you know, young 20-something Jewish woman, you know, in the late 50s, and Lenny Bruce becomes really good friends with her and helps her, I'll be looking like, what? I don't think that would work very well. You know, great, a really great season. I love that it wasn't until you get to the end of the season when she realized, because of the Sophie Lennon fiasco and what she's done, and perhaps conveniently for her, she had been using, you know, a pseudonym the whole time, or an alias, whatever you want to call it, whatever the right phrase is, you know, stage name.
A horrible name, yeah.
Yeah, Amanda Gleason, which... no offense to anyone out there named Amanda or Gleason. Separately, those are great names. Together, kind of boring.
Not a good stage name. No.
Yeah. Her first name was Jackie, maybe. But
Right. Yeah, that worked.
Yeah, we're for someone back in the 50s, if I'm not mistaken, who didn't require a fat suit. Anyway, but I just love that we end, and it's a lovely little way to end the season when it ends on the note of her saying what her actual name is. That's I'm Mrs. Maisel. So I really enjoyed that a lot. Oh, we ran way longer on season 1 than I meant to. God damn it. Okay. Fuck. Season 2. I really like season 2, and there are things I love in season 2. So there's no sophomore jinx here or anything like that. I do have some minor to medium problems with parts of the season that I still enjoyed regardless, but I was aware of it. And I think the biggest problem I have for me in season 2, and it does eventually right itself, is I felt like we spent way too much time drifting away from her comedy career in season 2.
That's because they spent like 50 months in the Catskills and like a month in Paris.
Exactly. No, that's exactly it. It is the Catskills in Paris, and then meeting and dating Benjamin. And again, love Zachary Levy. Is it Levy or Levi? It's Levy. But I think the show got a bigger burst of energy once we got back on track with her and her comedy. I mean, it's very telling that there's that whole thing in the Catskills where she bolts back to New York City just because she was going to get the opportunity to work the perfume counter again or something at the department store. Talk about like telling the story of a woman in the 50s. My God. Yeah, that was kind of painful. But beyond that, what were your thoughts on season 2?
Okay, I think that the Catskills I liked the whole Paris thing because it was just cute. It was good to touch on the family side of the story. Not entirely necessary, just kind of cozy. I will say that in the scene where her father, like when her and Abe arrived, this is not important to the show at all. This is more for my own amusement. But when they arrived and they got out of the car and they were both carrying all of her luggage, at that exact same moment, I was painting a small suitcase. I do face painting as a side job, and I was making a new kit. And I was using my grandmother's old suitcase, which was from the exact same set that they were carrying. So that was kind of a fun minute for me. But the Paris thing was fine. There was some good, fun moments, But the Catskills, I actually kind of loved because it embodied to me a family in the 1950s. When we go back and we think about it, that's kind of what we think of. Especially a white upper class family in the 1950s. I loved all of the scenes with Susie pretending she was a staff member at the camp. Like that was hilarious every time, her walking around with her plunger. So she kind of stole the season for me, I think. I mean, I love her anyway, but I really do think her story of always trying to fit in with the staff and then the staff eventually loving her, and the whole thing was funny.
Yeah.
But I also kind of liked the whole Catskills thing because, like, the tension that was there between her and Joel, again, you see that these people, they maybe were not meant to be married, but they are absolutely meant to be best friends and in each other's lives all the time.
Yes, I would agree with that.
The two of them rely on each other so much, and not like in a weird, healthy, codependent way. Just they're really good together, but not married together.
Yeah. I also got a big kick out of the Catskill stuff. It's very Jewish. It's very just. I mean, I wanted to talk. I mean, a good friend of mine. In the rarest of rare instances, because she's not much of a TV watcher, streaming or otherwise, and when she does watch anything, it's usually, I have to recommend it to her, and she doesn't like anything that's too intense, to this, to that, whatever. So, which means 90% of shows I would watch, she wouldn't watch. Like she won't watch. Like she knows Breaking Bad's a very good show, but she can't watch it, and stuff like that. She watched this before I did, and she's someone who's Jewish herself, from Long Island. Now she lives she's on the Upper East Side. By the way, real deal New York, we always prefer the Upper East Side to the Upper West Side, please. But it's a different kind of person who's on the Upper West Side. And so I'm watching the Catskill stuff, and I tell her, it's like, look, I know it's a couple of generations earlier, but I'm totally imagining your family doing this. I don't know why, but it's basically, I know we'd like to talk about other camps when it comes to our people, but this Catskill stuff was like super Jewish. It was like, I really enjoyed that stuff a lot. But there's also part of me that wished it could have been done a little bit tighter. Just been done. And the Paris stuff, I only want one episode would have been enough for me.
Yes, I think that would have probably done it.
And one of the bothersome things with the Paris stuff is this whole thing happens with the mother running off to Paris and then going to get her, and she's having this little life crisis and so on and so forth, blah blah blah. I never got much of the impression that she had changed any when she's back in New York. I didn't feel like that person I was seeing, for the rest of season 2 was much different than the woman I had watched throughout season 1.
No, you're right. And I don't think that we were supposed to see that she was different. I think we were supposed to see that accidentally Abe was different.
Yeah. Abe is interesting. And that's going to be one of the questions I'll have at the end of the podcast as far as where we are with his character. But there was a lot of really enjoyable stuff with Abe this season that I didn't mind it taking place outside of the world of, Midge and Susie and whatever. The stuff at Bell Labs, and every time they went into that room to talk.
That buzzer.
It was. I love repeating jokes. I love jokes where we have to do that kind of thing. Too. And the fact that they do that at least 2, I'm thinking that maybe could it be 3 times? I don't remember. It's at least twice on the series where the buzzer keeps happening and someone else keeps coming in. The lawyer comes. This one comes. I was like, I am loving this so much. Also, I had mentioned before, I'm a big Monk fan. I started to become more aware of the similarities between his character and the Adrian Monk character he played before in season 2, more so than season 1. When he starts really becoming more fixated on the precise nature of things and the odds and mathematics and whatever, to the point of where he's practically autistic about it. I was like, oh, there's a bit of a monkness to him. But wow,
or like he's going through he's going through Benjamin's history and his when he's questioning all of his history and the books that he's read and what illnesses did he have as a child, like every single little bit of information.
I think and I think you would have mentioned this yourself, maybe we have this in common for this show, especially just refocusing more on season 2 because it's also more recent in my mind. Most, if not all, of my favorite scenes involve him in some way as well. That's one of them. And on both sides of the scale. And then, but then all the stuff that involves him knowing about his daughter's, burgeoning comic career, including when he's in the audience seeing her perform for the first time.
Oh man, yeah, that was. It was almost hard to watch. Like, could you imagine the level of shock and how uncomfortable that would be? Oh my God.
But that to me, that's one of the great scenes in the entire series. How she, and it's fascinating to see how her mind works, because she's in pure panic, and like you can imagine all the negative emotions that are racing through her head, and and she's able to pull off an act which is actually one of her funnier acts that we've seen on the show. Was the whole riffing on her father and everything else. It was probably better than a lot of the other stuff that we've sat through on the show.
Right, but it also, and it shows, it's one of those things that shows us why she's cut out for that job.
Yeah, it there's a fascinating thing with her character because, on one hand, and that's probably the best showcase of it, that she's got really strong improvisational skills, and is able to just kind of do runs, stream of consciousness, whatever you want to call it. But on the other hand, we also see that she needs to, how, like all comics have to, how she has to perfect her act. I think it was in the previous season that we see this happening, where she's honing her act.
My favorites. That's definitely one of my favorites when they show her fine tuning everything.
I thought that was great. I mean, that's so true to what comedians have to do. And that's why they're constantly going clip work, because they're working it out and they're trying to get. A lot of it is about editing, and there's one thing when you're just a pure writer and you're editing, you're reading it back and forth and you cut it down. But if you're a comic, you have to perform it. You can't just do it to yourself. You need to have the audience need to know. Okay, I gotta cut this down. I gotta cut that. That's falling flat. That's not working. I love that with her. I think that's one of the strongest things about the show as well. But
I would absolutely agree. And how much work it takes to, like you're telling a joke that you've told many times, but then you kind of have to go off the cuff and just change your timing and change like 3 or 4 words, and you might not get a laugh. But you still have to bounce back from not getting a laugh on that, and then know, to take that part out the next go around. I loved that scene. I think it was an incredibly important scene to show people who just enjoy a comedy act here or there, like what it really takes to do that successfully.
Right. Which and what's interesting about it is, there's me just zooming right through the season to, I guess it's in the next to last episode? I can't remember. I should have written this down. The telethon.
Yes.
What she pulls off in the telethon episode. When throughout the night, her time slot keeps getting changed and bumped. They eventually realize it's due to the manipulations of Sophie Lennon again. And she's basically put on at the end, and what should have been something that would have just sunk her career-wise ends up being, the greatest thing that could have happened to her. And what she does, which is totally riffing. I think she had her material that she was set to go with, and instead she pretty much just riffs the whole time, and it just works. I mean, it just works so beautifully. It's really one of the uplifting moments, I think, on the show for me.
Well, one of the reasons why she's so funny, and what makes her so different from somebody like Sophie Lennon. Everything that Sophie Lennon does is incredibly calculated. She's very smart about the moves that she makes because she knows what it's like to have nothing. Mm-hmm. And so when she's, she went to drama school, she failed. When she tried to be an actress, she failed at it. So she's always afraid of losing. So she's very smart, like I said, in calculating every little move she makes. What makes Miriam so great is because she's just off the cuff. It's just who she is. So when she didn't have to worry about, thousands of people watching her because she lost her time slot, which was a better, spot to be in, and she had to do this at the end when most people had gone to bed, she had that well, fuck it. I don't have to worry about anything. Right. I'm not worried about impressing anybody. I'm just going to go out there and do what I do and have fun. And that's when she shines.
Absolutely. So now that we're in season 2 and we're kind of skipping around a little bit. I mean, there are things we can choose to talk about or not. Like the whole possible relationship with Zachary Levi is that actor is always likable. Either he's Chuck or Shazam or whatever else people have seen him in. And how could you? I mean, he's a good-looking, strapping lad too, especially when you put him next to Joel. I mean, not that Joel's a bad-looking guy.
But he's like boy cute. Yeah. He's not a man cute.
And Levi also probably looks like he's about a foot and a half tall. I'm quite frank.
Really tall looking, right? Like,
And plus, he's the real Captain Marvel, dudes. Anyway, but he's
well,
like,
and I think another difference between him and Joel is Joel wants to be funny, and Ben just kind of is. He's very relaxed.
His scenes, like the aforementioned scene with her father, and the fact that he's actually doesn't have an issue with her pursuing a comic career, which you could have easily seen him going, wait, what? And I like the fact that was not going to, at least until we get to the end of the series, was not going to be an obstacle for him.
Yeah, not really. I mean, maybe when she goes away for 6 months. I don't know,
that's going to be one of the that's in the question section I have planned here.
I love the scene of the two of them when they're in the Catskills and they're in the boat.
The boat scene's a great scene. Love the boat scene.
And I love it because not just because it's like funny, but it's so old Hollywood.
Yes.
And just like it's so nostalgic for all of those like Gene Kelly moments. It's beautiful. I love it.
Yeah, that's actually Gene Kelly. I like that. The bit about not rowing, great. He's a surgeon. Why do you want to hurt his hands? No. But one of the things I want to now get to now again, I'm not trying to take this too seriously with the show the way I might with other shows, but while I was watching season 2, I was trying to figure out a timeline for the show. Because we have a general idea of one thing. We knew it was 58, 59, but but there were certain things that kind of stuck out to me. And again, I come from a background of watching shows like I mentioned a couple, like Mad Men or The Americans. And I guess this would apply to the Crown as well. I guess it had to for that one, even more so than the other two. Where the people behind the show, the writers, showrunners, etc., take great pains to be very meticulous about adhering to the time period, making sure they get it right. Now, that could be, for bigger things like making sure you don't have any weird anachronisms show up. No one's on a cell phone or something like that. Or, well, they wouldn't have a can of Coke then. They didn't have cans or whatever, blah, blah, whatever kind of thing. But just getting the details right. So I was trying to figure that out for the show. And so I did a little research. And some of it's going to be a little silly. Now, on the 7th episode of the season, and I think it's the one that's called Look, She Made a Hat.
In first or second?
I'm in second season. Season. Because first season's done already, so it doesn't matter.
Okay.
They're celebrating Yom Kippur. And of course, I say celebrating. No one actually celebrates Yom Kippur. We observe it, because Yom Kippur isn't celebrating. Yom Kippur, we already knew this. They already said this is 1959 a number of times. I looked it up, and Yom Kippur fell out on October 11th in 1959. So I was like, oh, I have a baseline. I know I have a specific date this year. All right. Now, I think we might have mentioned before when we were talking about Lenny Bruce. I think they're playing a little hard and fast with him as far as obviously he didn't know anyone named Midge and all the other, but as far as things that actually happened in his own life, which they incorporated into the series. Namely, the big thing in season 2 is him appearing on the Steve Allen show. And,
right.
He does the joke about this. It's actually a somewhat infamous joke about Elizabeth Taylor, and then he ends up singing the song, the little All Alone number on the same show. And that happens later in the season. I think it's the no, actually it does it in the finale.
It's the final episode,
it's in the final.
Yeah.
But he did that in April of 1959.
Yeah.
So, but then we can say, you know what? No one's going to be smacking their wrists about this. We'll throw that out. We'll say they decided who cares, who's going to, it's like the U2 song getting the date of Martin Luther King's assassination wrong. No one really cares. The point is still being made. Even though everyone should care. Screwed up on them. Anyway. But
I'm just going to say that's very Abe of you.
Yes, it is.
To have looked up, oh, what date did this fall on? See, the reason they were able to do that is because 99.99999% of the viewers wouldn't do that.
But then we have but now let's go back to the telethon episode. And that was the 9th episode, so was it the next to last episode of the telethon, right?
Yes, because it was the final episode that Shai called her. So
right,
second to last.
Okay. One of the big things about that episode, and I think it's even the title of the episode, is her little mini controversy, which never really manifests, is that she does a vote for Kennedy thing, right? That's in that episode, right? Kennedy didn't declare his candidacy for anything until early January of 1960. So you see how I'm getting confused. Like, so I think are we technically in 1960 now? Because if she's having this telethon, it has to be after he declared that he was a candidate. He wasn't a candidate in 1959, so she wouldn't have said that. It wouldn't make any sense. She would barely even know who he was probably at that point.
Right, I follow you.
So then I go, okay, so let's say, and that's kind of a bigger historic thing. You don't want to, screw that up. So, okay, so let's say that telethon was January of, 1960. But then I'm like wondering, but I haven't seen any seasonal stuff. You're in New York City. There'll be Christmas lights. There'll be Hanukkah stuff. There'll be snow. There'll be all this stuff going on. So I was kind of getting a little frustrated. I was like going, I understand they don't need it. It's not a historical drama where all the characters. It's not The Crown,
right?
But I was like, oh, I wish you could just be just a little bit more careful. I don't care about the Lenny Bruce thing. That's fine. No one's going to care. Although here's what's going to happen. People, because as I was watching stuff on YouTube, you see all these comments like, I came here thanks to Mrs. Maisel, whatever. So people are going to figure it out when they say, oh, April 1959. Oh, that doesn't make a lot of sense. That's what the vote. Anyway, I just wanted to bring it up to show how much I care. But I'm just, and again, I'm curious.
At least somebody is looking out for it. Game of Thrones could have really used somebody like you.
Well, as far as I know, Game of Thrones didn't my assumption is Game of Thrones took place in another universe. So I
just mean as far as continuity airs and.
Well, yeah. Water bottles and coffee cups.
The need for somebody to go to the writers and say, no, this doesn't work.
I'm curious what they're going to do in season 3 as far as what the timeline is going to be. Because on one hand, I'm thinking they might do it. There might be a significant time jump in between seasons. But then again, if she's going on tour,
I don't think there's going to be a huge time jump. The reason being is because I think that the real conflict of this season is going to be what do I do with Benjamin, and what is going to be, there's going to be a conflict, I believe, between her and Susie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, and that's what the whole season will be about.
Yeah, I got it all lined up here. In fact, we can get to it right now. In fact, what the heck? We've kind of covered season 2 to whatever extent. I think we both, I pretty much, I liked both seasons a heck of a lot. I probably like season 1 to a certain extent, a teensy bit more, but then I think, but I really like Susie more in season 2. So I go back and forth on it. Maybe I just like them equally. I can just leave it at that. That's fine.
Well, I feel like if we don't get a fair amount of her parents, and maybe even Joel's parents, but mostly her parents, then I'll be pretty bummed out with season 3 because.
Oh yeah, but I think we'll get plenty of their parents. So, Shalu, her parents are mainstays because they're gonna be grandparents in season 3.
Maybe at some point Abe will figure out where to put all of his books.
Oh lordy. Well, their bigger issue is figuring out where they're gonna live. So,
they're gonna end up in Paris.
Well, with a new grandchild on the way, I don't think they're gonna be in Paris. So.
That's true. Yeah. Maybe.
Well, anyway, I actually lifted a bunch of questions from a Vulture article that I came across. because I wanted to make sure that we hit all the questions and semi cliffhangers that we got left with at the end of season 2. So we can kind of like I will say them and you can answer them, and I will either agree or disagree.
Okay.
And you already started touching on them because that's what I get for not telling you what we're going to talk about ahead of time.
That's what you get. Exactly.
Okay, Dan. Anyway, so you are the new Dan. So first one, question, and you brought it up yourself. Is Midge and Benjamin's engagement over before it even happened?
It's postponed until she falls in love with somebody on the road or she falls in love with the road. Then it will be canceled.
I'm gonna say it's outright canceled.
Okay.
Okay, go right into the next one. Question.
I'm just for my own sake, I'm gonna write down what your answers are and my answers, and then when we get through season 3, I'm gonna say neener, neener, neener for all of them that you got wrong and I got right. I don't know how many that's gonna be, but just for my own fun.
I'll be okay with that. Question number 2. Will Susie become Sophie Lennon's manager?
That's tough because I could see yes and I could see no. It really is.
She still hasn't told Mitch.
No.
She was about to. She wanted to, but then.
But we could really push her character if she were to be managing them both, because that's a bigger mark of success for her. And then we got kind of the Mitzi Shore. I think they kind of I think a lot of her is pulled from that. That would kind of be she's the one responsible for getting all these big comedians through. I don't know. I'm going to say draw because I don't know. I can't say for sure.
I'm going to say she's going to attempt it, but the problem is going to be if she's going on the road with Midge the whole time, and then she can't, and so she can't be at Sophie Lennon's beck and call. We'll end up demolishing that.
She's got rules.
Yeah. Question number 3. This is one I hadn't thought about at all. It's a great question. What exactly was Abe up to during his activist years? Because I read that. I was like, oh, that's interesting. That's right. All the stuff with Bell Labs and the government. It's like, forget the Midge stuff. What's going on with Abe? I'm very curious what he alludes to.
I don't know. I mean, he did go back to his, Max Costello lawyer and say hey, I'm going to need you. Hey, speaking of which, can we just say that when I saw Max Costello, I was like, holy shit, I'm getting old. Just want to put that out there. We are not in Doogie Howser days anymore.
I know. I had the same thought.
Okay, good. Well, at least we're all in the same boat of shame. It's
yes, okay. The same boat that's sinking as we speak. So, question 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, I mentioned this just a few months ago. Question number 4. Are Abe and Rose going to be homeless?
Oh my God, they're gonna. Well, I don't think so, because if they're going to be homeless, I don't know. I guess they could move in with the son and daughter-in-law, new baby.
That's going to go well.
It's just pretty funny stuff.
Yeah, I love that revelation that their apartment is actually owned by the college. So he's leaving the college. Hey, guess what? You know that insanely gorgeous apartment of yours? Bye-bye. Oh, I wonder if that means there'll be no more Zelda either. Will they have to feed themselves?
Zelda. I would hate for them to lose Zelda.
Yeah, we'll see. So that was, let's see. I should have numbered these. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Question number 5. Oh, this is what we were just talking about. What kind of legal action does Abe have planned with Michael Kessler against Bell Labs and possibly the United States government? I don't know, because he was filled with so much bluster there. It's what his actual case would be, I'm kind of confused by. I wonder if they're going to really pursue that.
And I don't know, and I think that's kind of like where part of it was just the honesty of the situation, but I do feel like some of the scene where, he is asking Midge, like, hey, you said this, what was the joke that you said? What did you say about me in the labs? And then
Right.
she was like, I honestly don't know what you do. I've never known what you do. And I think that's there for our benefit, that we are probably never going to know what he does. And that's going to be that.
Interesting. So question number, whatever number we're up to now. 6? I'm going to say 6. Are Midge and Joel ever going to divorce?
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. I think there will be a point where it actually is finally officially done.
Yep.
The papers will be signed.
Yeah, I agree.
So which leads to the next question. Is their latest hookup really just going to be for one night, or is it another instance of the vicious cycle Lenny was talking about? Oh, that's interesting.
I think it's just for one night.
Okay. I hope so. I will find it tiresome if they just keep ending up in bed with each other.
I kind of, okay, so in my head, in the scenarios I've played in my head, my hopeful speculation is that at some point, Joel, because he loves the business, he loves comedy, and he may not be cut out to do comedy. However, he's kind of cut out to manage a comedy, like a comedy club.
Well, he says that towards the end that he wants to run a club.
And so I think that's something he could really possibly be successful in. And so I'd like to believe that the marriage that Joel and Midge have had, whether it be, the traditional marriage or just the marriage of their friendship or whatever, that it continues in that aspect.
Okay. Yeah, I mean they're always gonna have a connection for a number of reasons, and if he ends up actually running a club, that could just be one more that'll kind of like factor into her career, possibly to some extent, depending on how successful she is from if she goes on that tour. Which is the final question: is Midge going on Shai Baldwin's tour? I'm assuming she must be. It'd be kind of weird to end that season, then her not do it, right?
Yeah, I would definitely think so.
Be weird. Until she gets booed off stage because we didn't come see some whack girl do comedy.
Right?
So, the third season. Now, beyond what we were just talking about, which are all factoring into what will happen in season 3, here's a little bit of what we know so far. As you mentioned, some portion of the season, I don't think we know if it'll be, either be a single episode or a multi-episode arc or not, is going to take place in Miami. So Miami, early 60s. I'm there for that. That sounds great.
It sounds like it's like a really obnoxious place. I mean, I'm all for watching it, but man, Miami in the 60s just seems pretty obnoxious all the time. I mean, there's a lot going on there.
I know, but I love the idea of that character there. I love that.
Yeah, in the 60s, well, that's going to be a hoot. A hoot, she says.
The show did start filming the third season earlier this spring, and they've been filming all around places in New York City, mostly concentrated on the Upper West Side, which makes perfect sense. We know that Abe and Rose are going to be, as I mentioned before, they're going to be grandparents again because Astrid made that announcement at the table. She's finally pregnant. I'm expecting that storyline will probably be, because the way they use that Astrid character, who says more Jewish stuff than all the actual Jews on the show combined.
Oh, I love her so much. I have like such adoration for that goofy girl because I always feel like if I were to marry into a family, a Jewish family, like that would so be me.
By the way, they are far more patient with her than most Jewish families I know because they were like, "Are you kidding?"
I love it. Well, I mean, look at who his daughter is. I mean, she's quirky as shit. So
true.
I guess, like, they're used to such silliness.
No, I mean, my expectation is they're going to play that mostly for laughs, though it would be kind of interesting if they suddenly decide to go a little serious with it. But this is a show that's more about being light than dark, so I kind of doubt they'll go there. So it'll probably remain light. Sterling K. Brown, who I'm thinking most people here out there know from This Is Us more than anything else, is actually going to appear on the series this season. It was through joking and talking at one of the award shows, and next thing you know, they were able to work out something in his schedule. My assumption, because of This Is Us, because they talked about scheduling issues, it's just going to be a single episode appearance.
Right.
I'm very curious as to what kind of character he'll end up playing. There's that little, even though, like as we said before, I think Lenny Bruce is the only actual historic figure that we've seen, not including the guy who looked nothing like Steve Allen on the Steve Allen clips. He didn't look anything like Steve Allen. They couldn't get a guy who even looked a little bit like him, Anyway, but part of me was like, hey, I wonder if Sterling K. Brown could play an actual historic figure, and because I started thinking about, ooh, that could be interesting, but it probably won't be. Conversations with actors, which now none of this means anything, but you kind of wonder if they're saying it if it does. This one more so than the next one. The actor who plays Joel, again, that's Michael Zegen, Z-E-G-E-N. He does not foresee the couple getting back together in the near future. Now, yeah, he's not on the writing staff, we know that. But the fact that that's still something to consider, because for him to come out and say such a thing makes me think that's probably going to be the case. Otherwise, they probably would have told him otherwise, I think. And Zachary Levi has said he would like to come back in some capacity in season 3, despite what, for all intents and purposes, looks like he got rejected by Midge in favor of her career at the end of season 2. This is what I was saying. I think we will see him, but I'm thinking we're only going to see him for 1 episode, 2 tops, but I'm thinking just 1. Just to kind of put the final nail in the coffin of that possible relationship.
The rejection scene.
Yeah.
Okay.
That is pretty much, again, it's not going to be that much. That's pretty much all I know about season 3. I don't know if you know anything else yourself, but that's what I know so far.
No, that's most of. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I've heard. No, that's pretty much what I've heard. They've given us a little bit of information, but I mean it's not as tight-lipped as some shows are. But
well, yeah, it's not. It's also quote unquote. It's not that kind of a show.
Right. There's not a whole lot of suspense, whodunits, or anything like that.
Yeah, we're not wondering who's going to end up on the the matzah throne or anything, and whatever. Wow, I hate myself for that. So I mean, so overall, I mean, I think we're both really big fans of this show. It's one of those. It's one of those shows where I'm kind of just punching myself for getting into it later than I should have. Although my one excuse, I have a really great excuse. I didn't get Amazon Prime until a couple months ago. So
yes, that's where I'm at. Like I got it. I don't know. Probably around Christmas time, maybe a little bit before that. My
main way of accessing anything Amazon Prime was my best friends who live around the block, and so I watch like an episode of a show every week with them, like on Sunday nights for dinner or something. That's how we watched the show Sneaky Pete, for example. And even though technically I could just watch all Sneaky Pete on my own right now, I hold off because I'm watching it with them.
Well, and I mean, one of the first shows that I really pushed through in Amazon was Man in the High Castle.
Oh, yeah.
I have endless of adoration for that show. I love that show, but having something like Maisel to follow it, which is completely on a different scale, and it was really it was a refreshing way to kind of step back into a more realistic, not so heavy
right.
place in my head.
I wish we were doing another podcast. I could probably spend a few minutes just talking about Man in the High Castle because season 1, yay! Season 2, really? Season 3, hey! So season 2 is horrible. I'm sorry, it's just
it doesn't have quite the same.
Yeah, season 3 makes up for it, but like my aforementioned friends, after season 2, they wouldn't go back to watch season 3, and that was one of the reasons I actually wanted to get Amazon, because I had heard season 3 was actually better, and I'm more willing to give shows a chance than a lot of people because no life, whatever. And I was like, oh, it's really good. And then I was like, oh my god, I have Amazon now. I can watch. Hey, there's that Maisel show I keep hearing about.
right. See, season 2 was not nearly as rough on me as I know some people. There were parts of it that I really liked that kept me in there just fine. But it was everything in that in that storyline is fairly heavy. I mean, not Handmaid's Tale heavy, but
Well,
still, it was really nice to come from something that's very gray and possibly, I guess you could say, bleak to something that's so light and fun and a bit like watching Broadway without the tunes.
I like the idea that you went from a show that basically focused on what if the Nazis won the war to a show that's the most Jewish show on TV since ever. It makes Curb Your Enthusiasm look like Facts of Life or something. I mean, come on.
And I love it, and that's just that it's a happy place to be.
Oh.
Whenever there's scenes in their apartment and the families are just you've got the actors just like bouncing off of each other, like line hit, line hit, line hit. God, I love
like
it.
this, when they get this, whether it be around the table for Yom Kippur or that earlier scene where they're all in that room together and you have both their families together, the pinball effect and getting Kevin Pollak and it is Kevin Pollak. That's right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow, it'd be really fun if I was using the wrong name all this time. And Tony Shalhoub together. That's that's comical right there. By the way, because I want to end on this. Because kept mentioning we oddly enough started talking about Man in the High Castle. Should mention that it's fascinating that in season 2 we get that one episode where it's Midge with the artist, who's played by Rufus Sewell, who most people know as the main Nazi in the Man in the High Castle, playing a very different sort of character. And I kind of enjoyed the fact that just again to see him do something else. Which is kind of because he's never known for playing. I know he's got a pretty considerable career as well. I can only think of a few things I know for sure. I've seen him in. I think he's in Dark City, if I'm not mistaken. A few other things over the years, but I've not seen him do anything that was particularly, at least his performance was fun. So it's kind of
he's on a dark. What the heck is it? With Heath Ledger, Dark Knight, what the heck was it? I don't know. He was like the prince or I don't know. He was the bad guy on that. I can't recall the name of it right now. Not Dark Knight.
A Knight's Tale.
Thank you. Holy crap! I totally went in the wrong genre there. But yeah, he's in that too. He just always plays a scowly faced mean man.
Right. That's why I just thought it was funny watching him play kind of a. Not nearly as drunk as you think he is, artist who was just being kind of like sarcastic.
Those were some great lines too. Like that character was.
Oh yeah, that's a character I'd almost like to see again if there was a way to make it work. But I don't think that'll happen. But it'd be kind of interesting. Like to see him interact with Lenny Bruce. How that would go.
Yeah, right. Oh my God, what a gem! What a gem that would be. I would love to see that.
Alrighty then. Wow, we. Okay, we were about 50% longer than I thought we'd be for this. Oh well. So usually, if you give 50% more, they appreciate it. So, but I'm thinking that's what she said. So, if you enjoyed this podcast about the marvelous Miss Maisel, you'd probably enjoy hanging out on our Facebook page as well. It's the Serious TV Drama Facebook page. Like the page and join the conversation about any number of shows, ranging from Black Mirror to Mrs. Maisel and so many others that we talk about and chat about there. You can also find us on the iTunes and subscribe to us. Just punch in Serious TV Drama Podcast, subscribe to the feed, and you can rate and review us as well. Pop us into Google. You'll find us 800 million other ways as well. Maybe that's where all the real downloads are happening that I'm not aware of. And finally, you can follow us on Twitter. I've actually tweeted twice through the account this week. I haven't done that in months. Our handle there is at STVD Podcast, STVD as in Serious TV Drama Podcast. I anticipate there will be a couple podcasts coming in the next couple weeks because, number one, Legion comes back season 3 on Monday. So there are plans to do that. We will see who actually gets involved in that podcast. Dan may be there from the start and then bail or not. I don't know. If I decide the season is not working for me after a few episodes, I might bail. I don't know. We shall see. I will mention that I did watch the pilot for Legion again a few days ago, and it kind of re-adrenalized me about the series, and I am planning to watch more episodes between now and then. I don't know if I'll be able to do. I can't say I'm going to be complete a total rewatch between now and when Legion airs again. Oh, by the way, I got like a 30-day trial for Hulu. Yay! So hence I can finally get Legion. And Brian, I can finally watch Atlanta.
Get yourself set up on if they do the same thing this year as they did last year. Thank you, Cam. They on Black Friday run a special. Sign up for it. It's 99 cents a month for a year.
Ooh, wow. Excellent. Where was I? So Legion's coming, so we're definitely going to podcast about that. And I'm hoping Dan will be involved because I do like the music that we use for Legion. And also a little show that a bunch of us liked, and I think is one of my favorite podcasts that single podcasts that we've ever done. Dark is going to be dropping on Netflix this Friday, the 21st.
I'm so excited.
And I believe, I think I got it wrong. I think I initially thought it was going to be a 6-episode season. I believe it's 8 episodes. I don't know where I got 6 from. It's still going to be a single podcast because I'm not splitting that into 2 podcasts. We didn't do it for the first season. I don't know why would we do it for the second season. So once, I believe, at least 2, all or most of us want to do that one. So it's just a matter of when we've all watched the show. And then we'll get together to do it. So it drops on Friday. Hopefully within a week to 10 days, we'll be able to get together and do it. You know, depending when. Because I know you want to do it. I think Brian might want to do it. Dan may want to do it. It depends on what his time frame is. I hope he does want to do it.
Even educated fleas will do it.
Even the birds and the bees do it. Okay. And that's about it. I can't think of anything else to say, and it's late, so I'm going to say thank you, Jamie, for being the stalwart partner in crime on this podcast this time around. Thank you very much for helping out and doing
Absolutely. What you do. As per usual, it's been fun.
And I can say it now because we're wrapping up. You had no Skype problems. Amazing. Might be a first.
Oh my God. Who would have known?
Your voice didn't, because you don't even realize it. Your voice didn't even go like it does sometimes. And I have to sit there like.
I didn't turn into a robot. That's fantastic.
That's amazing. You were like. Anyway, so with all that, and in the spirit of the show that we've spent the last hour and a half talking about, I'm going to raise my glass to you and say, tits up.
And in the infamous words of my girl Susie, I'm going to raise my glass and say, fuck you.